I'm actually surprised that Jake Gyllenhaal has never been in a superhero film up until this movie. Way back when, he was actually supposed to play Spider-Man at one point, and in 2014, he starred in Nightcrawler, which of course has nothing to do with the X-Men character of the same name, but his character in this film is a swindler, and his character Mysterio in Far From Home is another swindler of sorts. Could that be signs of any connections here as to what would happen in Far From Home? Shh. What is up, everybody? Random Man here, bringing you my review for Spider-Man Far From Home. Based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name, the plot of this superhero film basically follows our title character / Peter Parker, played by Tom Holland, who is recruited by Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, to face off against elemental threats from another dimension while he's on a school trip in Europe. Going into this movie, I was very much looking forward to it. How could I not be? Not just the shirt indicating how much of a big Spider-Man fan I have been since I was younger, but also with this being the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is the 23rd film in this overall franchise specifically, and it's also the last one in its Phase 3. What with Avengers Endgame over 2 months ago not only blowing up the box office to record-breaking degrees, but also in literally ending a lot of character arcs for some of our fan favorites there. And as many of us experienced and loved with Endgame, myself included, one would have expected it to be the final film in Phase 3, but again, we got Spider-Man Far From Home to be the ending of that section of the overall franchise. And I thought it looked to be a very promising entry in the overall series and just as a Spider-Man movie. In recent memory, us Spider-Man fans have been relishing and getting a lot of great content related to the character, such as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was my favorite animated movie of last year, one of my favorite movies of last year in general, and what I think is the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made. Yes, that is quite a bold statement, but if you want me to talk about just the live-action Spider-Man films, I do think that Spider-Man 2 from director Sam Raimi is still king, and speaking of the live-action Spidey films, Far From Home is a sequel to 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, which I did enjoy quite a bit, and now with this, exploring dimensional elements, it looked as if it was going to bring new ideas, not just to the Spider-Man character, but also to the MCU in general, and what may occur within the upcoming Phase 4. Starting out with the cast and their performances, we of course have Tom Holland in the title role of Peter Parker / Spider-Man. If I haven't emphasized this before in previous reviews for MCU films that Holland has appeared in, I'm gonna say it again. I think Holland, especially in Far From Home, proves why he is the best actor to ever portray this character. Not just because he is a younger dude and more believably plays somebody who is in high school, but also going into the all-around traits and characteristics that the character has so iconically been represented in various media over the years and has struck many chords with audiences worldwide. Holland is also just a straight-up likable dude in the role, and the physicality that he does bring onto the screen, it gives him more big thumbs up from me. In the supporting cast aiding Holland, there are quite a few notable players here, such as Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. Now, he has appeared in all 3 of this year's MCU films, here having a substantial role, kind of similar to what he did in Captain Marvel, but in this movie, with him constantly on Peter to do his duty as a hero while he is on vacation in Europe, Samuel L. Jackson plays this role amazingly. There's also Zendaya as Michelle, aka MJ, who I did like in Homecoming, but admittedly didn't have that much to do until she was revealed as MJ by the end. But here, her role is upgraded quite a bit, not just to be more of the love interest to Peter in this film, but also just her as an actress. I think that she does a pretty superb job in this film. Then there's Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan, the head of security for Stark Industries, and he steals quite a few moments. I've also got to give shout outs to JB Smoove and Martin Starr as the teacher chaperones on this Europe trip that Peter and his classmates are on. They do bring some of the humor out as well. And then some returning players from Homecoming. We have Jacob Batalon as Ned, Peter's best friend, who brings more of his adorable personality. Marissa Tomei as hot Aunt May Parker. I mean, just Aunt May Parker. She is solid here as well, making up the Peter Tingle line, which definitely brought out more of the humor too that I have mentioned. And then Jake Gyllenhaal, the big new addition here as Quentin Beck / Mysterio. Now, many of us Spider-Man fans know him as a villain, so it became quite a shock that when we saw the marketing material for this film, he looked as if he was working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Spider-Man to take care of these elemental creatures from another dimension that he's apparently from. I'm not going to go more into what his character does bring into the table, but I've got to say that he is fantastic here. And then other minor players I do got to mention here include Tony Revolori as Flash Thompson and Gowie Rice as Betty Brant, who does get upgraded just like Zendaya's MJ did here in this film. And oh my god, I just loved the chemistry she had between herself and Jacob Batalon here. And overall, I think that everyone in this film is great in simple terms, but shout outs have to go to Tom Holland and Jake Gyllenhaal as Spider-Man and Mysterio specifically for doing exceptional jobs. The writing of this film makes it very clear that it takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame, and at this point, I'm not even sorry if you have not seen the film and are gonna get some details spoiled for you, because everyone in the world who has wanted to see Endgame has already seen it. So, what with the death of Tony Stark / Iron Man, his presence looms large across the rest of the film, and for Peter Parker specifically, he has felt the brunt of it, to say the least. But at the same time, he wants to take a break from being Spider-Man for a little bit, and he hopes that this class trip to Europe, going all around different famous destinations, will get his mind off of things. Of course, even with his time abroad, there is no downtime when he has great power and great responsibility given to him as Spider-Man, as he still has other stuff to worry about that don't just involve him being Spider-Man. He also is trying to go after MJ. There's a bunch of other stuff he has to balance within himself internally, living in the shadow of Tony Stark. And of course, the elemental creatures from another dimension terrorizing various sites in Europe that he just so happens to also conveniently visit everywhere he goes. With all of that, this movie not only feels like an epilogue to Endgame that does feel like a natural progression of the series. The way Tony Stark does loom large, and then personally for Peter as a character and all that he represents, it feels, in my opinion, more well-connected and more free-flowing than even Spider-Man Homecoming, because as much as I did enjoy that film, my biggest issue with that movie had to do with Tony Stark's integration in that film, emphasizing that Spider-Man is not just an Iron Man Jr. of sorts, but also in it hammering home too much the connections to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Because one of the biggest strengths of Spider-Man Homecoming was that it felt like a John Hughes-esque high school film, and the all-around feel of that really made me gravitate towards it. And similar things do apply with Far From Home. I thought it was so cool that the movie did take us to those various sites all across the rest of the film, with the movie having shot on location to those locations to have the feel make it more authentic and the viewing experience to see all the diverse locales that our characters visit feel all the more tangible, and it feeling like that teen venture film that I think that this movie does really succeed in being. Then it also balances out in being a twisty superhero sequel, which, yeah, there's a lot of things in this movie that do fit the word twisty. There's unpredictability everywhere, not just with what goes with Spider-Man and him trying to enjoy his trip, but also in getting heckled by Nick Fury. Even Maria Hill is involved, played by Kobe Smulders. I completely forgot to mention her when talking about the cast. It's always nice to see her. But like I said, I thought it made for something that was absorbing. It's an entertaining movie to say the least. I thought that at a little over 2 hours, it had me so into it from the beginning all the way to its end, which I will mention in a bit. This is also due in part to the directing by Jon Watts, who does return from directing Spider-Man Homecoming, and I think he grew as a filmmaker here in focusing a lot of the character interactions and feeling very personal, not only between Peter and MJ or other characters that do have some specific one-on-one conversations with each other, and also the quips, the overall deliveries between the dialogue and the comedy, which, yeah, this movie is very funny, having a bunch of comedy laced in between that did help move along the pace of this film too, and just the overall scale and scope of this film, which goes along with the action and the way the action is directed and helmed. Wow. This is among the most stunning action sequences I've seen in an MCU film of recent memory, because it felt like this movie did go within its comic book roots, and not only with the character of Mysterio bringing to life some iconic images from the pages to the screen, but also in the way the inventiveness of the action made for something that was exciting, and the overall moves and powers that Spidey does have do make for a lot of ooh and ah moments on the big screen. Those ooh and ah moments are due in part to the visual effects of this film and the way they are integrated, along with the cinematography in it moving around various sequences of the film. And I also have to give a mention to Michael Giacchino's score. He also did the music for Spider-Man Homecoming, and I thought he did a pretty outstanding job there. And here he does a similarly outstanding job in creating orchestral scores that do feel very Spidey-like in their essence, and it's all intercut in between the sequences that feel like they are not too obstructive or not too subtle enough in that we don't notice the music, but the rest of the editing also goes in the way of it feeling like the movie is going at a specific rate and just transitioning from scene to scene. Despite me having a very fun time overall with this film, there are a couple issues that I have to mention that I did notice stick out within its overall narrative. With the writing, as I said, this movie balances itself out as a teen vacation film and as a superhero film. And when it comes to the character of Mysterio, like I said, I thought Gyllenhaal gave an excellent performance, but also his character was very interesting. But I do have to say that the movie does lack some logic, not just with his character, but also in the way some things do happen too fast, not in that they hamper the pacing, but in the way some of the narrative did flow. I could have had some more clarification as to some of the schematics between the interdimensional stuff that Mysterio mentioned, or how some things do come to a head by the end. In other words, I think that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did a better job implementing its own dimensional and multiverse elements than Far From Home did, with a more graspable and tangible degree. It probably would benefit from me having a rewatch to either have some things cleared up and clarified for me. Also, in the way that Mysterio and his visuals go about, sometimes the CGI in this film didn't feel excessive per se, but sometimes they did stick out in being a bit sketchy. There is this one green or blue screen moment that involves Spider-Man and Happy Hogan. You'll know it when you see it. That was very noticeably made on a computer. What with the outline of Happy Hogan specifically and the background not looking as convincing as it should have been, it just looked kind of bad. And this is to be expected with movies that are CGI heavy, like ones from the MCU, but really those aren't major issues in the slightest, as overall I really enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home. As small-scaled as Homecoming is and what it did very well in its own execution, I found myself more entertained by Far From Home and what it did. And with all that has been said and done, in it being the dessert to cap off Phase 3, especially after Avengers Endgame, what is going to come forward with Phase 4? Oh man, all the chatter with the mid and post-credit scenes of this film and what they do and bring to the table for the MCU going forward. Woo! I got so pumped up seeing those scenes. You haven't witnessed the entirety of this film until you have seen the mid and post-credit scenes. I'll just leave it all at that. With all that I have said and more, Spider-Man Far From Home comes definitely recommended. My final verdict for Spider-Man Far From Home is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Spider-Man Far From Home, social media links in the description, subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.